The Weymouth to Portland Railway. About 5 or 6 years ago, I downloaded a freeware copy of the train simulator Southampton to Weymouth mainline file. Whilst mooching around the Weymouth station, I noticed there was a branch off to a further station a short distance down the track. This was Regis, I learned, the purpose-built station that served the Weymouth to Portland branch railway line. The line created in the original train simulator route finished shortly after the girder bridge over what was the backwater. So after further research I decided to recreate as best I could this branch line to Portland in the train simulator program. Before beginning the journey to Portland, I will quickly reflect on the history of Weymouth Station. Here is the view today of the area surrounding Weymouth Station compared to what it looked like in the middle of the 20th century. With the advent of railway mania in Victorian Britain, there were a number of schemes to reach Weymouth which would quickly be developed as a port, opening up trade routes to the Channel Islands. The original Weymouth station was built on marshland reclaimed from the backwater, and it was opened by Great Western Railway on the 20th of January 1857 as the terminus of the Wiltshire, Somerset and Weymouth line from Chippenham. As expected, the railway quickly brought prosperity to Weymouth, which rapidly developed as both a cross-channel port and a holiday resort. Anyway, back to the Weymouth to Portland branch. Back in the mid-19th century there were also great plans for the expansion of Portland as a port, and the railway would be integral with developing this vision. Another big consideration was the ability to get stone off of the Isle of Portland and to market, particularly as the freight rates by road at that time were considerably high. If we look at a map from the late 1860s, we can see that Regis station didn't exist. The original line was served by Weymouth station across a long wooden viaduct over the backwater. This was a big problem as in pre-Regis days, as a train from Portland leaving Weymouth had to perform a time-consuming runaround. It took over 40 years to resolve this problem, as it wasn't until May 1909 that the station of Regis was built on part of the backwater to save the branch train from having to reverse to enter Weymouth station. At the same time, the original timber viaduct was replaced by a 5-span lattice girder bridge shown here. On a bright sunny day, we are aboard the 1:15 from Regis, which is scheduled to arrive at Portland at 1:33. As the train completes its traverse over the viaduct, we approach Westham Holt across the Abbotsbury Road. Today, this spot marks the start of the Rodwell Trail. In June of the same year, Regis finally received its long-awaited halt, and a second halt was opened at Westham on the north side of the new viaduct, both being provided as part of a GWR plan to fight road competition. As we leave Westham Holt, we begin our ascent of the Marsh Embankment. This is around a 1 in 60 climb and caused a great deal of trouble when constructed. In the newspapers of 1865, it described this embankment as around 700 yards in length and 50 feet at its highest point. It contains 250,000 cubic yards, representing a light number of tons of earth, and the total had to be raised a shovelful at a time by the navvies. It goes on to tell us that treacherous characters of the soil of the marsh, once a portion of the backwater, the weight of earth meant that it sank between 15 to 20 feet before it met a solid foundation. As we pass by the old Weymouth football stadium, a shout out from my old friend Brian Lawrence, who played 666 games for the Terrors. This 3D map of the area graphically shows the extent of the incline and the relative amount of earth required. As we climb towards Rodwell and proceed under Wyke Road through the tunnel, we have a view of the train taken from above the Union Workhouse situated on that road. At the time of the building of the railway, there were 170 poor souls residing in there. This is the overhead picture today of the old workhouse on the approaches to Rodwell station. The next station on the route is Rodwell, opened on June the 1st, 1870, without ceremony, with 14 passengers boarding for Portland. In 1908, to improve efficiency and attract more passengers, the line was modified here to allow a passing loop. Rodwell Station was the quintessential country station, complete with colourful flower beds, and was a regular winner of best kept station competitions. Rodwell Station is set in a deep cutting 400 yards long and over 30 feet deep, and was excavated partly by blasting, the stone having a particularly hard nature here. I mentioned previously the marsh embankment and the vast amount of material required in its raising. Well, this cutting provided some of the material for it. As we travel on from Rodwell Station, we pass the spot where the constructors' pick and shovel brought to light skeletons of dog, horse and a man with pottery pointing to Roman occupation. We are just about at our highest point in the line, which is about 80 feet above sea level. As we pass through the cutting, we are greeted by a fabulous vista looking towards Portland. Looking back to the map from the early 20th century, we see mostly fields surrounding the line at this point. Contrast that with this overhead picture of the area today, showing the original line in red. In 1932, it was decided to create another stop on the line, Sandsfoot Castle Halt. This halt was built in 1932 at a cost of £340 in an attempt to attract tourists to the line, as it was by that time suffering badly from competition from the buses. Now, on our descent towards Portland, we are approaching the final halt before the Chesil Bank in Portland. In 1891, Robert Whitehead purchased 8 acres of land beside the railway and set up a manufacturing facility in Regis. Whitehead was an English engineer who developed the first effective self-propelled torpedo. With the newly constructed Portland Harbour already testing torpedoes, it was an ideal site to build his new factory. This resulted in an influx of workers and tradesmen all needing houses, schools and places to relax, and over a period of time red brick terraced houses began to appear around Old Wyke. Finally, in 1909, a halt was built at White Regis, and during World War I the factory was in full production, with over 1,000 workers using the halt each day. This is the location today, showing the remains of the halt cutting surrounded by housing. As we leave the factory behind us, we cross the long gone wooden viaduct over Smallmouth, the original entrance to the fleet. The original viaduct was 240 yards in length and had 27 spans. In time, a metal span bridge replaced the original, with the replacement bridge over the fleet at Smallmouth being demolished in 1972. From this point, the line was easy to construct with no engineering difficulties. The length of line placed on the Chesil Beach was about 2 miles. This spot would be running through the car park behind Billy Winter's Beach Bar. The contract for the total construction of the nearly 5-mile line was won by Messrs J. Aird and Son of London, with a cost of around £15,000 per mile, including the purchase of land. By 1874, this company were the largest contracting company in Britain, employing over 30,000 people and as many as 20,000 on the Aswan Dam alone 20 years later. The loco shown here is a GWR 5700 class, which was a class of 060 pannier tank loco built by the Great Western Railway and British Railways between 1929 and 1950. With 863 built, they were the most prolific class of the GWR and one of the most numerous classes of British steam locomotive. Today, although the course of the Backwater Railway Viaduct has long since been replaced by Weymouth Road Bridge, probably over 80% of the line can still be walked. Former platforms at Westham and Rodwell are still to be seen, and as mentioned previously, a large section is a popular green trailway, the Rodwell Trail. About 3/4 of a mile from the station, the line was screened by a 6-foot wall to prevent unnecessary alarm to horses. My reconstruction terminates at what was the second Portland station. This station was built to serve the Weymouth to Portland railway extension to Easton in 1902. Maybe one day I'll extend the reconstruction round to Easton. The new Portland station became fully operational in 1905, as the old Portland station was always considered to be cramped and was very busy in the late 19th century, handling stone traffic. As with many branch lines, the Portland branch had for many years been experiencing competition from buses. By the 1950s there was a bus every 10 minutes between Weymouth and Portland and every 20 minutes to Easton. It therefore came as no surprise when closure of the Portland line to passengers was proposed in September 1950. In 1950, British Railways had made a loss of around £14,000 on the passenger service, and it was announced that the line would close to passengers on the 3rd of March 1952. There was never any suggestion that the line should close to goods traffic, as at this time it was still very profitable. There were still regular passenger trains carrying military personnel to Portland Dockyard, special works excursions and rail tours. However, by the early 1960s good traffic was in decline, and it therefore came as no surprise when closure was proposed in November 1964. The official closure date was the 5th of April 1965, but a number of trains used the line after this date to collect wagons and tools, and the last train to run the full length of the line was on Friday 9th of April 1965. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this simple reconstruction. Unfortunately, due to the limitations of the programme, it can't really convey the beauty that surrounds this long gone branch line. Just imagine if this line had been preserved. It would surely have been a huge magnet for tourists and rightly have claimed to be one of the most scenic heritage railways in Britain.